You can now support Ghost Maps on Patreon. Simply look for We Are HANTU or click the link in the description. Ghost Maps, entry 109, Hougang, Singapore. Betty, my third interviewee for this evening, like the last two, has the third eye. And apparently, so do I. Mei Li, a spiritual master I just spoke with, told me that several entities have been asking her to pass a message to me. They want me to tell their stories. With my third eye opening and the Hungry Ghost Month coming up, I imagine that I'm going to be dealing with a different kind of interviewee soon. But first things first. Betty has quietly learned to live with her gift, or her curse, depending on how you look at it. I think it helps that my dad had it too, and that we were very close, even before that, she says. So it's like a connection that we shared. It was, in fact, while with her father that she learned what it meant to have a third eye. I'm about to turn my recorder back on when I look up and see two shadows by Betty's side. They're not the first things from beyond the veil of the ordinary that I've seen tonight. Earlier, I saw something with Mei Li, but only briefly. I couldn't make out what that was. Probably one of the many spirits that still follow her around. But now, there's no mistaking the vaguely human-shaped figures. I'm stunned for a moment, but regain my composure almost immediately. Or so I think. Betty's clearly noticed my reaction. She's about to say something. I quickly and politely cut her off though, by switching my recorder back on and asking her to start from the beginning. Betty and her family were living in Hougang at the time. People forget just how recent the development of everything past, say, nativity churches, she says. Back then, she continues, Hougang was covered more with trees than with housing blocks. There was even a cemetery in the area, one that separated Betty's family's flat from the main road. To get anywhere, a lot of the time, they had to cut through it. Betty was 5 back then and fascinated by the cemetery. There was a unique beauty to her about the way it existed harmoniously with nature. Trees sheltered mourners, tombstones were overrun by grass, animals rested among the graves. Her father, on the other hand, always seemed nervous whenever they walked through it. She didn't understand why back then. Most of the time, her father was jovial and lovingly affectionate with her. He was always the one to tuck her in at night with a bedtime story. She was always the first to get a hug when he returned from work late. So, his almost cold silence in the cemetery confused her. Till one fateful, rainy Thursday morning. Betty wasn't feeling too well. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a slight flu, but enough to keep her out of kindergarten for the day. Still, her parents needed to go to work, so her father asked his parents to babysit her for the day. As always, they walked through the cemetery, along a well-worn path between the graves, to get to the bus stop. It was a chilly morning. The sun was up already, but obscured by grey clouds. Betty's father kept his eyes straight ahead and held onto her hand tightly. As they neared the end of the cemetery, however, Betty shrieked with glee. I saw this sweet-looking elderly couple standing next to a pair of graves, she said. The couple was just a few meters away, but completely silent, with neutral expressions plastered across their faces. They waved at Betty slowly, gesturing for her to come over to them. I know, she says with a laugh. Weird thing for a kid to get excited about, but I was an easily excitable child. The couple were dressed in very traditional, very formal wear. Betty noted, in particular, the deeply green shirt that the old man was wearing. She started asking, then pleading with her father to let her go play with the couple. She didn't notice at first that he looked deathly worried, and she certainly didn't hear him when he shakily said no. He tugged her along by her wrist, but somehow she managed to wrestle her way out of his grip. Her father panicked and chased after her, running, tripping, recovering, and maneuvering between the tombstones and uncut grass. Finally, just before she could reach the couple, Betty's father grabbed her by her arm and squeezed tightly. She kept shrieking happily about playing with the couple until her father slapped her across her face. "Shut up," he said, fear choking him. "Stop talking." Betty started to cry. Sorrowful, heartbreaking wails of a child who just didn't know better. Her father, racked with guilt, apologized to her profusely. Then he looked up and saw that the couple's expression had changed. They were angry. Betty's father dragged her across the cemetery. The old couple seemed to follow them at first, but stopped short of stepping onto the well-worn path. "We got to the main road and I never saw them again," Betty says. But that doesn't mean she didn't hear about them. That evening, after her parents thought she had gone to sleep, Betty's dad was telling her mum what had happened. From behind her slightly ajar bedroom door, Betty heard her father speak about the couple and how they called to her. "In all this time, none of the ghosts ever bothered us before," he had said. The word ghosts shocked Betty. Her parents had always used euphemisms instead in front of her, or completely avoided saying the word altogether. Her father had said it so plainly, so matter-of-factly. Betty feels like that might have gone some way to informing her own approach to her third eye. Her father then told her mum about how he had hit Betty. Even though she couldn't see him, she could tell by his voice that he was crying. And then he described the couple's response. Betty's mum gasped. She asked her father to describe what the couple was wearing again. And Betty heard her mother rush to a cupboard and rummage around. "Was this them?" her mother asked her father. Betty guesses that she was showing him an old photo album, because the next two things she hears are her father agreeing and her mother saying, "Those were my deceased grandparents." "I'm fairly sure my dad had to pray for forgiveness at my great-grandparents' grave," Betty says, though I never saw him do so. As she says this, the two shadows by her side start to fade away. Just before they completely vanish, though, I catch a glimpse of their features. An elderly couple, one of them wearing a deeply green shirt. Her great-grandparents' spirits, I can only presume. I try not to flinch as the shadows completely disappear, focusing instead on Betty. After their shared incident, Betty tells me her father showed her a whole new side of himself. "We grew even closer," she says, with a wistful smile. "We became best friends, all the way till the day he passed." I ask if they bonded over their shared gift, and she shakes her head. I think the fact that I made him feel less alone was what brought out this new level of love, she says. I tell her that's wonderful, and her wistful smile turns into a smirk. "I'm glad you think so," she says, because my next story is nowhere near as sweet. If you want to discover more of Southeast Asia's other side, subscribe now and follow us on social media. You can also be one of our supporters on Patreon. Look for We Are HANTU or click the links in the description. Ghost Maps is a HANTU production created by Kyle Ong and Wayne Ray, with art direction by Jolene Lim, and recorded on Audio Technica mics.